Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Thomas Morelli, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, a quick note. Please use the chat box to ask questions. We'll answer as many questions as we can, and any we can't cover, we'll follow up with you directly via email. Today's session is focused specifically on AEC firms. If you're an architect, engineer, contractor, or you work in IT for an AEC firm, this is for you. We're going to talk about a question almost every AEC firm we work with asks at some point. We've spent years building one of the richest project archives in our industry. How do we gain intelligence from it? Microsoft 365 Copilot is a powerful tool. Most of your teams already have it deployed, but there's a gap most firms hit early. The work that matters in an AEC business, that's the specifications, the contracts, the change orders, the project histories, doesn't live in SharePoint. It lives on CloudFS. And until recently, that's exactly the data Copilot couldn't reach. Panzura Nexus changes that. Joining me to talk through how, what's involved, and what AEC firms are actually doing with it are Mike Harvey, our SVP of Products, and David Barley, Principal Solution Architect. Welcome, Mike and David. Mike, give us a 90-second version. What is Panzura Nexus?
Thomas, Panzura Nexus is what makes your CloudFS file estate accessible through Microsoft 365 Copilot. It connects the two in near real time with the same permissions that you already trust, and it does so without moving a single file. Your data stays exactly where it is. Your teams keep working the way they already work. But now, this is the part customers find compelling. They can ask Copilot questions about their data, their CloudFS files, and get real answers. Have we done a project like this before? Stops being a 2-hour to 2-day folder hunt. It becomes a 30-second conversation.
David, let's set up the technical context.
Absolutely. Let me pull up the slide. So at a high level, Panzura Nexus is an event-driven integration that bridges CloudFS and Microsoft Graph. That's the data layer Copilot uses to find content across your environment. The key word here is event-driven. Most AI connectors rely on scheduled crawls. That means they go look at your data on a regular cadence and update what Copilot can see. Panzura Nexus doesn't work that way. It listens to CloudFS in real time. So the moment a file is created, updated, renamed, or has its permissions changed, that change flows through to Graph almost immediately. That matters more for AEC firms than you might think, and we'll get into why.
Mike, why is this an AEC story? Microsoft has rolled Copilot out across nearly every industry. What's unique about how AEC firms are using it?
That's a great question. And it gets at something we feel pretty strongly about here. AEC firms, they're not like most enterprise environments. There's a profile that's almost unique to the industry. So first, they're project-based. Everything they do, the way the teams are organized, the way files are structured, the way billing works, all of this revolves around projects. Most of the unstructured data is project data, drawings, models, specs, RFIs, submittals, change orders, meeting minutes, contract documents. That data has a life cycle that doesn't fit the way a typical knowledge management tool thinks about content. And second, there's decades and decades of this. You know, that archive isn't dead weight. It's the most valuable thing in the business. It's the institutional memory of every project that has ever been delivered, every problem that's ever been solved, every proposal that has ever been won and lost, and all of the lessons that have been learned. Third, they're distributed. AEC work happens everywhere. In the office, on site, at a client's office, on the consultant's laptop. CloudFS is in the environment for a reason, right? That's because keeping files in sync across all those places with the same permissions and the same single source of truth is genuinely hard. And that's the problem that CloudFS was built to solve, and that's why it was implemented in the firm. And fourth, this is the one that's been the hardest to crack. Your permissions are complicated. AEC firms work on confidential bids. They work on federal projects with sensitivity classifications. They work on healthcare projects with HIPAA implications. There's DNA with clients. Project teams change every 6 months. ACL permission structure on the file system is doing a lot of work, and that has to be respected end to end. If an AI tool can't honor those permissions, you can't use it, period.
Yeah, and that last point is where most AI tools fall short. They flatten permissions. They make a copy of your data into a vector store, and somewhere along the way, the careful access controls you've built over the years gets reduced to everyone can see the index, can see the data. For an AEC firm, that's not a deployment problem. That's a non-starter. It's how you lose a contract.
Right. So when we talk about Panzura Nexus being AEC specific, what we're really saying is this is a category of customer where the 4 things I just described, project-based work, decades of archive, distributed teams, complex permissions, all converge. And those 4 things have to be handled together. You can't just solve one and skip the others.
David, let's get under the hood. Let's go deeper on the technical side for just a moment. How does Panzura Nexus actually connect CloudFS and Copilot without a migration project?
Yeah, let me pop up another slide here. So 3 things are working together. Okay, the first is the event-driven architecture I mentioned. CloudFS has a rich audit stream. Every file operation, permission change, and metadata update is logged in real time. Panzura Nexus subscribes to that stream. When something happens on CloudFS, Panzura Nexus knows within seconds. Then there's the Microsoft Graph integration. Graph is the API Copilot uses to find content across your Microsoft 365, right? Your emails, team conversations, SharePoint sites. Panzura Nexus pushes CloudFS content and metadata into Graph using the same connector framework Microsoft built for partners. But it does this with custom event-driven logic rather than relying on the standard scheduled crawl pattern. So your CloudFS files appear in Graph as if they were native Microsoft 365 content, except they're not. They're still sitting on CloudFS where they always were. The third is permission fidelity. This is the part that took us the most engineering work, and it's part that we're the most proud of. When Panzura Nexus pushes a file's metadata into Graph, it pushes the actual access control list along with it. When a user asks Copilot a question, Copilot evaluates the user's query on every query against their identity. It returns only the results that user is authorized to see. So if you can't see a file on CloudFS, Copilot won't show it to you or surface insights from it. If your permissions change tomorrow, Copilot reflects that change real time. We're honoring the security and permission structure exactly as it exists.
Thanks, David. Mike, what's the business consequence of that architecture?
So it's the difference between we're considering AI for our file estate and we actually deployed AI for our file estate. The customers that we've worked with through this process have all had the same experience, right? The IT director or the compliance lead looks at the architecture, asks the questions that David just answered, and says, okay, this is actually viable for us. Without the ACL fidelity and the non-migration approach, AI on AEC data is mostly a theoretical conversation. With it, it becomes a project that you can actually scope and deploy in weeks rather than quarters.
Yeah, and Mike, one more thing worth saying, because there's no data migration, there's also no data duplication. We're not making a second copy of your files, right? Your governance posture doesn't change, your DLP rules still apply, your backup strategy, your audit trail still applies. That's a clear operational simplification.
Gentlemen, let's get into the work itself. Mike, give us the scenarios. How are AEC firms actually using Panzura Nexus day to day?
Yeah, I'll walk through 4 scenarios that we hear about most often. And David, I'm going to lean on you for the specifics. The first is precedent search and proposal response. The second is field operations and RFI management. And the third is design coordination. And the fourth, and maybe one of the most important, is succession planning and institutional knowledge.
Great. Let's start with precedent search and proposal response. Walk us through it, Mike.
Proposal response is the one where AEC firms see value almost immediately, right? And because it's a workflow that every firm runs constantly and every firm finds painful. So imagine if you're a proposal manager working on a federal project, let's say a courthouse renovation, $60 million, response due in 3 weeks. Your firm's done courthouse work before, you know that. The question is which projects and what did you write that won them or lost them? Who worked on them? What were the technical approaches that resonated with the client? So prior to Panzura Nexus, that's a minimum 2-hour folder dig, maybe 2 days, maybe more. You're going to go through SharePoint, you're emailing senior people, asking what they remember, calling everyone you can find in the Rolodex. It's a long process, and it depends entirely on finding the right person who knows the right information. With Panzura Nexus, the proposal manager asks Copilot, find winning sustainability narratives from federal courthouse projects in the last 5 years. Copilot searches the knowledge graph, observing the proposal manager's permissions, which is very important, and returns the language from actual proposals that won, not summaries, citations, or ideas. It delivers real answers to your questions.
And let me jump in real quick because it's worth adding, and we get this question a lot. In this case, the proposal manager only sees what they're authorized to see. If there's a confidential bid in the file system that they're not allowed to see, Copilot doesn't surface it. The provision fidelity is doing its job.
Great. Let's move on to field operations. We have a clear value story, David.
So this is where the Copilot interface starts to matter in a way that surprises people for the first time they see it. Picture a site superintendent on a project. Let's say it's a mid-rise commercial build. The structure's going up. They're standing on the 3rd floor slab. They need to know whether the latest approved structural drawings for Area 3 have any associated change orders or RFIs that might affect the work happening that morning, right? Before Panzura Nexus, that would have been a phone call back to the office, right? A wait for someone to dig through the project folder and call back. Could be 20 minutes, could be hours. Now flip that with Panzura Nexus. That superintendent picks up their phone, opens Copilot, and says, show me the latest approved structure drawings for Area 3 and any associated change orders or open RFIs. They get the information, the change orders, the open RFIs, all on their phone while standing on the slab.
Right, and the broader point about field operations is that AEC work doesn't pause for IT infrastructure, processes, or delays. The decisions on the site happen in real time, right? The cost of waiting for the right information is real, and that's standby time, rework claims, and schedule impact. Panzura Nexus makes the Office archive useful in the field, and that changes the economics of how you actually run projects.
Let's talk about design coordination. David?
Yeah, so this is more of a designer-facing scenario, right? So an engineer working on a hospital project needs to specify a particular type of mechanical equipment. Let's say it's an air handling unit for an operating room suite. The specs section exists. Past projects had similar requirements. The engineer wants to know, how did we spec this out on the last 3 hospital projects? What were the equipment manufacturers we ended up using? What were the issues that came up during commissioning? That's a query that previously required asking 3 or 4 senior people, hoping at least one of them might remember. With Panzura Nexus, that engineer asks Copilot and gets the specifications, the submittal logs, and the commissioning reports, all from the past projects, right? Surfaced through natural language. Specific knowledge that used to live in people's heads is now searchable across your firm's entire CloudFS portfolio.
Right, and that's the use case that scales the best as the firm grows. Smaller firms can sometimes keep specific knowledge in a few key people, right? We get that. But larger firms cannot. The bigger you get, the more your competitive advantage depends on making prior knowledge available across the whole organization. And Panzura Nexus makes that real.
Let's talk about the 4th one. Mike, you mentioned succession planning and institutional knowledge. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, let me jump in here. This is a conversation I have a lot with senior leaders at AEC firms. The people who know the firm best, they often carry decades of knowledge, right? Decades of design judgment and client relationships, technical instinct that you don't find in any handbook or system guide or how to, right? And when they walk out the door, that tribal knowledge, it walks out with them. What does live somewhere is everything that they wrote down over the years. That's a fact. The design memos, the client correspondence, the technical reviews, the lessons learned document, the punch list narratives, postmortem reports, all of this tribal knowledge is on CloudFS. And none of it is currently searchable in Copilot. But with Panzura Nexus, the next generation can ask the firm's archive through Copilot questions like, what did our senior principal write about the cantilever design on the museum project? Or show me the client correspondence on the airport project from 2018. The judgment isn't fully replaceable, of course, but the body of knowledge becomes a teaching tool for the people who come after. And that is that's really a generational shift in how firms capture and transfer expertise.
Let's move on to deployment and governance and compliance with Panzura Nexus. David, for the IT directors watching today, what does deployment actually look like?
Yeah, so it's actually a lot lighter than most people would expect, right? So Panzura Nexus runs as a virtual machine deployed on the same LAN as your CloudFS node. From there, the deployment is roughly 4 steps, right? So step 1, we enable CloudFS audit event streams, right? These audit logs. Most of our customers already have these running and in place. Step 2, they configure the Panzura Nexus storage and AI system plugins, right? So this is where you tell Panzura Nexus which CloudFS volumes to listen to and which Microsoft Graph tenant to publish to. Step 3 is defining your governance policies. And honestly, this is where AEC firms spend the most of their time, and rightly so, right? It's you scope the ingestion by file path, by file extension, size, age. You're deciding what classes of content go into Copilot and what stays out. If it's active project work, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Confidential M&A documents, probably not. Legal hold material, definitely not. The point is you control this. We don't ingest anything you haven't explicitly authorized. Step 4, you can use a dry run mode, right? This is critical for AEC firms with regulated and compliance sensitive workloads. Dry run lets you see exactly what content Copilot would index before any data is actually published to Graph. You can audit it, adjust the policy, and audit again. Nothing goes live until you're ready.
Right, and once the policy is active and the dry run is signed off, that data is searchable. And that's why we sometimes describe Panzura Nexus as instant AI for your file estate, because there's no services engagement, as David said, there's no model training, and there's no migration project. The infrastructure and the knowledge was always there. We're just making it accessible.
Let's talk about firms with federal work or other regulated engagements. What should they know?
So 2 things. First, Panzura Nexus inherits your existing classification model. If you have files with narrow ACL permissions on CloudFS, those travel with the metadata into Graph, and Copilot respects them. Second, because nothing is migrated, your existing compliance posture doesn't change.
Right, and so the takeaway for any IT or compliance lead listening to this is that Panzura Nexus is designed to fit inside the governance model you already have. You're not architecting or managing a new one.
Excellent, guys. We promised we would keep this short for our viewers today, but we do have a few questions left from the audience that are coming through the chat. So let me put a couple of to both of you. Mike, let's start with you. What about Copilot licensing? Do we need to do anything new on the Microsoft side?
That's an easy one. Short answer, no. If your firm is already licensed for Microsoft 365 Copilot, Panzura Nexus integrates with that existing licensing. We're not adding a Microsoft side cost. We're making the Copilot license that you already have a lot more valuable by giving it access to the data that it couldn't see before.
David, here's a question for you. What about hallucinations? How do we know Copilot is giving accurate answers from your CloudFS files?
This is actually a great question. So the way Copilot handles Panzura Nexus surface content is the same way it handles any other graph content. It's leveraging the grounded content from your CloudFS, which dramatically reduces hallucinations. Plus, on top of that, the user can always verify against the source of truth, which is still your CloudFS filers.
Mike, this is the final question before our time runs out. What's the right way to get started?
Yeah, so two parts. If you're an existing Panzura customer, thank you for your business. Your customer success manager is the right first call to make. We can scope a Panzura Nexus deployment for your environment specifically, and that includes your CloudFS topology, project structure, and governance requirements. If you're new to Panzura, the best way is to visit panzura.com/demo and book a session. We'll walk through Panzura Nexus and all of the relevant use cases.
Thank you, gentlemen. David and Mike, thank you both. Thank you for all of us who joined us today. This concludes today's webinar. A recording will go out to all registrants in the next 24 hours. If your question was not answered, we will follow up directly in email.